Hello and welcome to Tech Accelerator latest insights. Welcoming today Dane Kayem, who is from Workplace Risk Technology. This is going to be first of a series of insight series that we're going to run on a particular case study. But before we go into the case study at all and talk about that, Dane, could you kind of give us a bit of background about what workplace risk technologies
Yeah,
do?
absolutely. So we're a risk advisory firm who helps support organizations with a better understanding of insurable risk problem statements that may be impacting employers, policyholders, but right through to insurers at a portfolio level. We partner with injury prevention groups, insurance brokering houses, and insurers to better understand those problem statements and then identify and then steward technology vendors into that particular process to help contribute to solving and hopefully reducing that insurable risk exposure.
Why do you do it? What
Yeah.
brought about workplace risk technologies?
My background is insurance. However, I do have a career that commenced as a legal practitioner, working both for the plaintiff and defendant insurance markets. However, in 2018, we went through a process of discovery around what were some of the things that were potentially going to help improve employers' insurable risk profiles. And what we had identified was that the adoption of technologies into a work health and safety environment and framework was certainly going to be, pivotal opportunities for organisations to really try and drive sustainable change in those programs. So what we had identified then was, how do we fit in that particular process? And obviously, we probably didn't have too many great designs of being a technology vendor ourselves. However, what we did identify was that we could help organisations better understand the problem statements that are impacting them, and then taking those problem statements to a cohort of vendors and trying to help support both parties with the integration of those technologies.
You seem to focus a lot on musculoskeletal disorders, i.e., MSDs. What's the problem with them?
Yeah. So obviously it's a global risk, and it's a risk that impacts many, many different people, both from a work and non-work related perspective. However, within our region, Australia Pacific, Southeast Asia, we have some mandatory obligations in terms of certain types of insurances that we have to prescribe for employers. One of those insurances is workers' compensation. So effectively, an employer must take out a policy of insurance to indemnify their employees in the event of a workplace injury. One of the largest causes of injuries within a workplace is manual hazardous tasks, which can lead to the injury profile of musculoskeletal disorders. So a natural fit of that is that we have many different clients across many different industries, ranging from aviation through to aged care, into transport logistics, into retail settings, who are impacted by musculoskeletal disorders. Um, what initially started off as us trying to identify meaningful ways of data collation and collection has now moved into different types of controls and approaches that organizations can integrate into their safety management systems and processes. So we now partner with a variety of technology vendors, but also injury prevention groups and risk advisory firms such as insurance brokers, and of course our insurance partners, to better understand how we can roll these technologies out at scale for those type of employers, so they can institute various types of controls ranging from computer vision technologies into wearable sensors right through to wearable technologies, but also then underpinning that with the appropriate policies, procedures, and behavioral coaching responses that can be integrated and adopted by employers.
Mm. So we did a report at the end of last year on MSDs and the cost to the global economy being around
Yeah.
$1 trillion. How much would you say, um, you know, attributes claims are attributed to MSD in
Yeah.
Asia?
So it's a really, really large proportion of it, and depending upon industry types, the average cost of a lower back strain can be up to $137,000, depending on state, territory, but also employee type of profile. Um, but what we have seen, however, is that these type of technologies, if adopted from a preventative perspective in a participatory ergonomic framework, can actively really resolve or at least contribute to resolving and mitigating the frequency, but also the severity of these type of injuries, enabling employers to be able to scale out training and education, but right through to also identifying and isolating at-risk individuals and then providing the appropriate support mechanisms around them to assure that they're going to not only be prevented from these type of injuries and illnesses, but in the event of that occurring, that they've got the appropriate mitigation strategies in place to help them recover.
Hmm. So generally, would your customers be the insurance companies or the workers' compensation brokers that are trying to drive down those claims and bring in the preventative measures?
Our client base is a composition of, the insurance community, which does include policyholders right through to the brokers who are advising and placing those insurances, and of course the insurers and third-party claims agents themselves. Our customer range can be, ASX listed organisations, Fortune 500, but we've also supported mum and dad business owners as well who are seeking to improve the ways of working for their employees, but also trying to find more sustainable approaches to managing risk profiles that are impacting the health and well-being of their employees, but also their insurable risk.
Mm. And I came across, obviously we've got our own partnership, but one of your case studies, which is the Mitolo case study, we're calling it. um, but it's just a fascinating story of really how we as Safety Tech Accelerator would approach looking for and finding technology. But it's just great to hear how this story pans out and this chain come together. So I'm going to kind of, pass over to you to just give us the overarching story, because as part of this process, as we've said, all of those individual links in that chain are gonna join this series and tell us their particular parts. But from your perspective, tell us this fascinating story.
Yeah, it's a great story of how multiple stakeholders are really actively working in a collaborative, transparent manner to be able to identify meaningful ways to support the general well-being and health of an agricultural group in South Australia. For me, what's exciting about this collaboration and the project was that every individual stakeholder had an acute part to play in this particular process. And it was a great example of how a supply chain within insurance can actively work towards resolving and preventing, these types of insurable risks. What was also great was the embraciveness of the employer, Mitolo Farms, their leadership, and also their employees about their willingness to engage with alternative and emerging forms of technology to assure the well-being and preservation of safety within their work site and workplace. The exciting elements about it, however, is that now Mitolo are obviously moving towards a much broader scaled approach, and to the best of our understanding, we believe it may well be the first ever mandatory wearable PPE program in the world, which will enable the organisation to really start to look at the different insights that technology can afford them as an employer, but also bring out scalable interventions in partnership with a really robust group of network providers such as ergonomists, injury prevention groups, obviously the insurer or third-party claims agent, employees mutual, and right through to the technology vendor in this particular circumstance, who are going to showcase a diversity of types of technologies to help resolve various critical risks, but also various insurable risks that are exposed for that business.
Mm. So this story, unusually starts with the insurance company. So just lead us through that, and how this chain came together.
I think it's seemingly quite unique to workers' compensation, whether it be Australia, whether it be in Singapore or Hong Kong or even the United States. That insurers are now becoming more interested in insurable risk from a prevention perspective. Employers Mutual have an outstanding reputation of establishing really collaborative ways of working with their policyholders and their customers. But importantly, what they've also been able to do over the last couple of years is really integrate various types of technologies to help resolve for some of these risks. So Employers Mutual really start this process because not only do they have a policyholder in Mitolo who had a problem, they actually have a broader acute issue where they're actually examining insurable risk, but also the themes that sit within that and what type of technologies and approaches could be potentially identified. So they would then went out to their provider innovation network, in which case that an injury prevention group called Prudence Rehabilitation were engaged, who effectively then started that process of saying, well, look, we do believe technology has a part to play in solving this, and a large contributory part to that. But it's then what is the right technology and how do we adopt those particular technologies? That's how we got involved. They reached out to us and said, how would you potentially tackle or approach this particular problem statement, and what potential vendors may exist out there? So we went through that stewarding and sourcing process with them. Obviously, we found a composition of technologies that we thought would be appropriate. We then represented that back through to Prudence, who then subsequently represented that to Mitolo and to Employers Mutual. And that started this amazing journey, which has elicited some incredible outcomes and results for that particular policyholder. But for me, I think the greatest win around this is that the employees themselves were actively engaging on that product and program on a daily basis. And that level of wearable activity within the employee group in cohort was pretty much unprecedented from our perspective. And we've done over 200 plus technology interventions over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. So from our perspective, it was just incredible to see that depth of activity, that willingness to engage, and that trust that they had in the various stakeholders contributing to that program, but also the trust they have in the employer themselves, Mitolo, as employees, to say that we do believe that you're here supporting us and trying to identify better ways of working for us. And they were actively engaging. So I think the greatest outcome in this was certainly the engagement with the employees.
Yeah. And that engagement with the employees will potentially reduce the risk profile by, you know, what?
Yeah, so the exposure for that organisation, without giving away too many commercial
Mm.
information, is, we anticipate that, the reduction will see, 50, 60% in injuries, reduction in that MSD classification. That's just extrapolated based off our pilot results to date. But what I think is perhaps more important is the level of data collation and insights are now going to be generated will help inform future steps for the business, not just, for today and for monitoring those injuries, but to identify areas of improvement from a transformation and automation perspective that will hopefully better inform their leadership as they start to make the next commercial steps in their in their capacity as business leadership group.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great story. I really like it, and looking forward to speaking to everybody else. I suppose we probably should, talk a little bit more about why um, workplace risk technologies and Safety Tech Accelerator, have formed this partnership, and what we're hoping to achieve from it. So, from your point of view, uh, what do why partner with Safety Tech Accelerator?
I was first came across, obviously the Safety Tech Accelerator at the National Safety Council conference in New Orleans in 2023, I believed, when a colleague of mine, Cameron Stevens, introduced me to, the team here. And I thought what was really empowering and interesting was that your organisation had this really global approach and a real process and methodology to be applied to help steward employers into integrating technology into their injury prevention frameworks. And I just found that was really, really interesting. The diversity of risk that you had worked across, obviously Lloyd's Register, will drive you towards the maritime industries. However, you had such an exhaustive experience across so many different industries and verticals, but also the various types of applications and technologies. So for me, as a provider who's supporting organizations out of the APAC region who do actually have enterprises in Europe, right through to the Middle East and Africa, into the Northern American states. It was empowering to be able to find a partnership where someone who takes a very similar approach and framework to ourselves, and then really can apply that at a global level and lens. I think also it's the diversity of capacity and capabilities within the Safety Tech Accelerator, which is really, really unique. You have the balance of technologists, you have the balance of, industry expertise and experts right through to, people who are working at that nexus of problem statements that we actually think are problem statements that are, materially impacted by insurers, brokers, and the alike globally. So we're trying to find that familiarity, and we're very excited to identify what next steps do look like.
Mm. Yeah, it's great. And obviously working with MSD, we did the paper, but working with the NSC, we are, pledgees, alongside you and have a mission of keeping people safe. I think being mission focused really helps an organisation. And, obviously we've just added to that with the use of emerging technologies, but our mission is to keep people safe. Um, so what opportunities do you see, for workplace risk technologies and or our partnership outside of APAC?
I think for us is that this insurance issue or concern is a concern globally. So it's about identifying some of those problem statements impacting our insurable partners, looking at our employers, and really identifying how we can partner together. We do believe that, from our perspective, that we will start to see work within the ports sector, and obviously you have your safety in ports innovation initiative that is currently, at play. We also are very keen to identify, a globalized approach to managing risk within aged care, but also right through to other verticals and industries as well. So the opportunities for us will be, are taken to wherever the problem statements exist from an insurance perspective. But our goal along that way is to bring that insurance community into that framework as well. And I think that's what's really, really empowering about this partnership is that it now enables not only employers, but brokers and insurers and their third-party claims agents to be able to have a globalized approach to managing these risks. And, in many, many, many ways, a lot of the approaches to things such as musculoskeletal disorders are global, but they also can be harmonized approaches. But you do have to have that nuanced connectivity to, the industry, but also importantly, the environment and the context of that work and where that work is set. Safety Tech Accelerator provides that reach for us as a business, and hopefully we can help extend the great work that you guys are doing throughout the APAC region as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited that, we're working together, and some of the problem statements that we're already answering, one concern I have, and, do you notice it? In Australia, it's very clear that this, risk, right, is in one pot, right, and it's highlighted, and the businesses can be shown or actually work with the level of risk they're exposed to. Whereas I feel that here in the UK, it's potentially diluted in our kind of the way our businesses tend to be functionally split. So we might have a health and safety director who's responsible for wellbeing, but doesn't really know what the cost to the business is regarding, uh, injuries or people on long-term sick, etc. And I kind of worry that our boards aren't really aware of the level of risk their businesses are exposed to from this. Um, is that me just catastrophizing, or do you see any evidence of this?
Yeah, it's certainly sentiment that we're hearing from the market, to be completely honest. And I think a lot of it, certainly is materialized in, very significant regulatory fines in the event of, prosecutions being successful. So what we are hearing from our market insurers is if these type of technologies can help support defences and reasonable defences of claims, then obviously there's going to be greater adoption. But I think at the heart of it, however, it's really around that cultural element of, do I want to keep my employees safe, and do I take the reasonable actions required to be able to, do so? Technology can form part of that. And I think that what we need to do is be able to identify what are those core drivers within the United Kingdom and European markets. And the way we'll do that will be through our relationships with the insurers and the brokers, but also other advisory firms who are working within these regions to better understand the material economic and insurable risk impact, but also the cultural impact and the impact of well-being at work. Our goal here is to ensure or try to help to contribute to the ensuring of employees being, prevented from injury and illness whilst at work. But at the heart of that was we need to understand those complex landscapes, and I think the insurance community in particular can certainly be really, really powerful in supporting that through the identification and collation of data, but also the insights that they're already there gathering themselves, and finding ways to collaborate on those insights, and then designing sustainable interventions that can be scaled out to not just large enterprises, but also mum and dad business owners who are materially impacted by these same types of risks.
Mm. So I did an interview with Life Booster, who I know you're, one of our mutual companies that we work with, and I asked him at the time, tongue in cheek, could Life Booster be the black box of insurer, compensation insurance? But generally, do you think that we could influence that industry to take, not saying more seriously, because I'm sure it's a very serious subject, but to take prevention as a more punitive offering, if you like, to say, look, unless you're going to bring prevention in, then policies are going to be more expensive, like the black box, for instance.
Yeah, really interesting. I think the insurance community is obviously still navigating emerging technologies and the way that those technologies can materially impact insurable risk programs. We are seeing out of the United States, however, some safety technologies branding with insurers over there. So ComScience, for example, Kinetic Insurance, Kinetic's a wearable technology company. So we're starting to see insurers collaborate with them, offering white label insurance solutions and saying, look, you will get sustainable deductions and or reductions in your upfront claims experience by engaging with these particular products and solutions. The appetite that sits behind that really comes from, obviously, having an acute broker who can sit there and actually understand, can their customer adequately integrate these type of technologies and sustainably manage them to assure that they're going to get that insurable risk benefit. Longer term, however, I think that we do need to have a more integrated approach, but we would need to steward that as a community, really bringing all key stakeholders on board. And I think this is where the Safety Tech Accelerator can really actively contribute at a globalized level by help partnering with insurers and brokers to not only identify, the appropriate types of technologies that could help prevent injury or incidents from occurring, but also actively work with them to actually understand the limitations of that particular type of approach. We are still going through an innovation phase within a lot of these technologies and emerging technologies, and it's about trying to find really sustainable approaches that can enable all stakeholders on those particular journeys to be able to engage positively with those technologies so that they are sustainable. But to your point, we already are seeing, technology vendors integrating with insurers. Longitude 6 have just announced a global partnership with Zurich, which will see their suite of technologies, scaled out. We're hearing of, other processes and programs like Modjoul with Hartford. So, they're already existing. It's about, how do you access those types of technologies? How do you integrate them? And importantly, how do your employees, benefit from those levels of intervention?
Yeah. And that's our job, really, isn't it? Just in a nutshell there, Dane. That's down to us to kind of bring that together for them. So I just want to thank you very much for your time today, and and a really interesting insight series. And I hope it's excited people for the rest of the Mitolo case study that's to follow. Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining our Insight series, and look forward to the next episode of our Insight series on this Mitolo case study. Thanks again, Dane.
Thanks, Helen. Cheers.